Namo Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesas Paschachade Sutare Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Agyanata Ramandasya Gana Gana Sadakaya Chakshuram Viltanena Tasmai Shri Rama. So we'll begin by talking from the Bhagavad Gita. Do we have Bhagavad Gita here? You want to be the adapter?
The adapter?
Yes.
What do you mean?
To adapt the verses you can take it. Or you can bring a chair. Can someone bring a chair? Mother Kanchana.
Okay, I can do it.
Oh, no. Does anybody want a Bhagavad Gita? Does everybody here have a Bhagavad Gita? Are there persons here who don't have a Bhagavad Gita as it is? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Everybody else has a Bhagavad Gita as it is? You want a yogi? Those who have not read the Gita, you can give them. You can raise your hands and we'll just let you read through. Some of you might have.
What verse are we in?
Well, we'll begin with text 9. Mother Kanchana will read it.
What chapter?
Sorry, text 9 of the 3rd chapter. Text 9 of all 18 chapters. We recite them simultaneously and see which words you can pick out. You want to try?
Well, there, just give me.
Who else was it? What chapter?
3:9 will be the first one. Go through a couple of connected verses and move into one of Srila Prabhupada's most favorite books. Who here has not read this Nectar of Devotion? Have you read? Cover to cover.
I have not read the last name.
Yes. This is perhaps more important than Bhagavad Gita in a certain way. This is our handbook of Krishna consciousness. This is our guidebook. By our guide, we are Rupanugas. So, please.
You want me to read the Sanskrit?
Yes, please.
Yagyartat kamnonyatra lokoyam
Read one verse and we can all try to recite.
Oh. Okay. Yagyartat kamnonyatra
Yagnata kamano yantra
lokoyam karma bandhana
lokayam karma bandhanam
tadartam kama kunteya
tadharvam karma kunteya
mukta sangha samachara
mukta sangha samashara
Yagya artat
Yagya
done only for the sake of yagya
only for the sake of yagya
or Vishnu.
Karmana
Than work. Anyatra otherwise.
Loka
World. I am this. Karma bandhana. bondage by work.
bondage by work.
Tat,
Tat,
of him.
Artam,
for the sake.
for the sake.
Karma, work. Kunteya, O son of Kunti. Mukta Sangha, liberated from association. Samachara, do perfectly. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage.
Want to read the first paragraph. This is the explanation by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Since one has to work, even for the simple maintenance of the body, the prescribed duties for a particular social position and quality are so made that that purpose can be fulfilled. Yagya means Lord Vishnu, or sacrificial performances. All sacrificial performances also are meant for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. The Vedas enjoin Yagya Vaya Vishnu. In other words, the same purpose is served whether one performs prescribed yagyas or directly serves Lord Vishnu. Krishna consciousness is therefore performance of yagya as it is prescribed in this verse. The Varnashram institution also aims at satisfying Lord Vishnu. Van ashram achara vata purushena parapuman Vishnu aradate. Vishnu Purana 388.
So the principle here, in this 3rd chapter, 9th verse, is Yagnashta Kamla Yantra Lokayam Karma Bandhana. That if we are not acting in resonance, in harmony with the Supreme Will, then those actions will cause us to be bound by the modes of material nature. So what does that mean, to be bound by the modes of material nature? This term karma has become prevalent now in the English language, but used without much precision. In the Sanskrit language, there are multiple, even in English of course, if one studies the language, there are multiple and even contradictory meanings of any particular word, although Sanskrit is a much more precise language than any other language. But karma basically means, in the first platform, the working of a person, the karma, the activities that a person does. But the more profound meaning, the more spiritual perception of this word, karma, is that which is keeping us within a condition of suffering. So, our first predilection in this material world that we're conditioned is that we think that we'll make some adjustment within the material world, and then our suffering will be less or perhaps minimalized. And corresponding to that is that if our suffering is less or minimalized, what will happen? Why do people want to suffer less and to minimalize or stop the suffering?
To be happy, free from misery.
Well, to be free from misery is a kind of happiness, but more than that is they want to enjoy. There's a slightly similar reference in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhogashvarya, I think it's 5:29, Bhogashvarya Vasaktanam. that's another. Bhogashrayas Pratakdanam. That we try to enjoy in this material world. Lokayam karma bandhana is that, but we are not realizing that this material world is not where we're supposed to be, and that is a very big jump in the everyday consciousness of people in the modern world. In places in the world, like India, other places, they take the aspect of the soul and reincarnation as a given, but maybe don't have much of the details of that. Previously, if we go back to the Western traditions, and we go back to the earliest of the, what we say, currently prevalent Western traditions, which is the Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions, although both of them will not like to have them incorporated together. But Islam is based on the teachings of Abraham, and so it is very Judaic, as is Christianity, it is very Judaic. But that is another story, another topic that we don't need to enter into. But in those traditions, even a little while ago, the understanding was there, although not so prevalent, that life is eternal for the soul. You die, and according to your activities, then you get a different position. So these three religions have differing views on that. But it was a given, it was like a fact. People grew into that. Now in the modern world, I was just listening to some documentary, some person who's like really loving his intelligence, came up with a novel idea of applying this already proven false idea of evolution to the idea of the evolution of society and religions, and plucked out this idea for which he has no proof, that in order to cope with the problems of life, man created this idea of God and religion. And he happened to be an Indian. Indians are really good at atheism. But he didn't deny that there was God or religion. It was just simply an academic discussion without any substance. It was just a random speculation that since this happened and this happened, so the two should corollary, but you could also make 1,000 other corollaries. This is what they speculate. In the Bhagavatam, which is the words of the Lord, Bhagavatam, the words about the Lord, Dharmatu Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. So this path of spirituality, avoid the term religion, which often means just some faith, it can't be created by some ordinary person. So the principle is we have two different approaches, two different viewpoints of this material world, and there's a gray area in between them where they're overlapping. Then on one side is the completely materialistic vision, is that we're suffering in this material world, and that's life, you know. Or, yes, we're suffering in this material world, and we can use our brains and find out how to make a solution to it. And then we can figure out many ways. This was the core of the principle of enlightenment, that we should apply every ounce of human intelligence. This was Sir Francis Bacon. He wasn't the first Bacon, by the way, but in terms of, there was Richard Bacon, who preceded him, who was a much better philosopher and scientist, but he got overshadowed by Sir Francis Bacon, who is considered the father of enlightenment.
So every ounce of our human intelligence should be focused on how to increase our pleasure in this material world. And at that time, 500 years ago, people were much more inclined to religious thought and, you can say spirituality. God was a given presence, and there were very few persons who thought the possibility that God did not exist. But as time went on, this weaponized the thought. To every thought in people's minds is that the purpose of human life is to enjoy, and to capacitate that, we should have as much as possible. Every ounce of human being's thought and action should go towards sense gratification. So that's one side of it. And it wasn't previously like this. I don't have time in a short time, but there are some fantastic books who researched this subject matter, scientists, and they've shown that as this core, they didn't highlight who injected these changes, but they studied how the changes reflected that people's consciousness used to be that most of the things had to relate something to a higher purpose in life, other than just enjoying the senses. And when we see that as this idea that the senses are primary and that's all there is, and when you die, well, that's it, So we might as well get as much out of it as possible now. So then we see that as soon as that happened, it infiltrated every nook and corner of society, and everything that used to have a touch with the divine or the eternal got eliminated. And even that which is supposed to have a touch with the divine has become corrupted or mostly polluted with this idea, So you go to the church and you have a bingo hour. So that's okay, raise some money, but you see it's become mostly very materialistic to the point where people, if they have any feelings, it's mostly blind and without knowledge. So what is liberation? What is the symptom of a person who is no longer in the concept that I am this material body? So the other side is this, that I am not this material body. This life is temporary. And it has a purpose other than just eat, drink, and be merry. So as that evolves, the other side is, one side of the spectrum is that there's no other purpose in this human life but to eat, drink, and be merry. And the other is that all of this is temporary. It's not that we don't give credence and balance to it, but that is just temporary. It's just like I have this pullover, this jumper. So this has a purpose, right? It keeps me warm. But it's temporary, so if something happens to it, yeah, it's a nice one. It might be hard to find a good one like this. Yeah, it's an annoying thing. But you can always get another one. It's just a temporary thing. And we become so attached, we see that people become so attached. Someone just does a little thing to something they have, and we see even amongst those who are in spiritual life to a bit, someone does something to something they have, and it's like the end of the world for them. It's the end of the world. Like Srila Prabhu was talking about this man who hit, and I've seen it myself, but I'll mention it from Srila Prabhupada's talks. Some man who hit a bicycle in a crowded market, hit the man's car, and the guy got out, and he says, "You've hit me," and I've seen this, every time, so many times, especially in India. Especially a rich man, he'll hit somebody else, and everybody will join and yell at that person, "Oh, you hit me," you say. So, but you're not that car. The very term car means a vehicle, a Ahamkar is in Sanskrit. Aham means I. So there's two perspectives. One is ahamkar. I am this, what? Body. And what's the other one? Aham?
Brahmasmi.
Brahmasmi. I am the soul, the spirit within this body. That as soon as that spirit leaves, well, those who are attached to me and have seen me in this body, well, there will be some mourning. I remember when my father died. It was the end of my universe. I loved my father so much. Still, it's like so many years ago, 60 years ago. And still, I'll cry. Oh, I love my father. He was such a good spiritual teacher. I love him 100 times more because I realized that he took pains to teach me this very subject. My first lesson from my dear father, which to whom I'm eternally indebted. He was the preceptor who introduced me to the concepts that later my spiritual preceptor introduced me. And his first teaching to me was when I had done some little business deal when I was a toddler, little unusual, precocious training at 3, how to figure out how to make some money by bringing things from one to the other. And my father, he didn't say, oh, this is fantastic, we've made some money, it's okay. But he introduced the same concept to me. That you see, that whatever you get in life is the grace of God. So we don't think that. Who thinks that? Who thinks that? And those who think that and speak about it, I'm not getting into some political debate here, say like the Muslims, Inshallah is the grace of God. You see, when a person's religious, we kind of think, whoa, fanatic. So sometimes they can become fanatic, but we should think every moment, oh, this is the grace of God on me. First, beginning with what we get that's good. This is the grace of God, and my father continued on. He says, and therefore one should use at least half in the service of God. So this is what every person should be given, their very first lesson in life, and they should see their own parents executing this. That we get something, and it's not for me to enjoy. I'm simply a caretaker. Just like when you go to the bank, and you hand the teller some $100 cash deposit in your account, and then the teller is thinking, when I go home, my husband and I were going to have a good time. He just gave me $100. They print out a receipt. Of course, now it's all computerized, so you can't do such a thing. But we're thinking, we're getting this, but it's not mine. I'm simply a caretaker. So the symptom of liberation, it begins with this, that I'm the caretaker, and as the caretaker on behalf of God, what should I do when God gives me something? Somebody?
Be grateful.
Yes, be grateful. And
Give half.
Use that.
give at least half, use it in God's service. That's the principle. It's not mine. We come to this world, we enter the womb of some mother, like riding, through the gentleman's vehicle. They combine to become a baby, and it grows, and then we came in this world with nothing, and we leave, and everything we have we're going to leave behind. So materialistic or spiritual, that's the fact for everybody. But the difference is that those who have the spiritual touch, the spiritual vision, they see that this is temporary, and so then what the question then comes, not that there's nothing, what do I do? What is this activity? And that's what's discussed in this verse. So let's tackle one more verse. 14?
7:14. Was it 14?
7:14.
Yeah?
Yeah, 7:14.
Maybe we should.
Yes.
Shall we do the same as we did with the other verse?
No, we'll just read the Sanskrit once, and then the English.
Vaidihe shagunamai mama maya daratyaya mamaevaye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it.
So the condition is we can ask a question. So the statement or the proposal is that we can start looking at people's consciousness from this aspect, that some persons are in the extreme of materialism, like that fellow who was using his fertile brain and seeing that, there's a lot of these people around, and they come to the conclusion that there's nothing but matter. And even religion, it really has, some people are more negative about it. This person tried to be objective. It doesn't really have any meaning other than a survival tool, an emotional survival tool, at best. Or they say, even Einstein, his latest revelation is his letters, in which he directly says there is no God, which is a very unsound scientific statement. One can say, I don't know if there is a God, but if one looks at the facts, then there's everything that points that there has to be some sort of higher hand, which is not a human hand, that is in the works. Even like this eyelid. This eyelid contains just the eyelid of the eye contains so many features. There are special glands in there that secrete different chemicals, and without that, functioning, then you have a big mess, And it's so complex and so interwoven that how could it just happen, Just like the glands in this eye, how would that come about, It's like, and without it, then the eye can't function, So everything has to come in place exactly at the same time, and for any one of those things to happen by chance would take millions and hundreds of millions of years. So it really doesn't add up, the numbers. So anybody who believes that, but let them believe it. So there are those who, against any evidence, they is going to dig in and believe that there's nothing but this materialism. And those who are fully clear, they understand that there's just the soul and the Lord God who has created this world. And that's our singular purpose. And in between we have persons who are of mixed opinions. So mixed devotional service. So read the translation once more.
This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it.
Read the next verse, just the English.
Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are the lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So
this is the description of one class of person. No way. There is one group, they're Christian creationists. I find their presentation not objective enough, but they did a clear objective study of scientists and doctors and persons who are of that category. And they found out of 50,000 persons, hardly 500 believed that there was God. So look at that ratio. 1% of persons who we are respecting have good brains. So the production of good brains, this is the education, is to pour into the mind this conception that this is the purpose of life. To have more than other persons, money, to have a better position, it's all, and it's just like pouring ink into water. What happens when you pour ink into water?
It gets dark.
Yes, it gets dark, it takes on the color of the ink, or the color. So this is the three modes of nature, this is the science. So once we have any spiritual aspiration, this is the grace of God. It's not by chance. There are some specific incidents which are talked about in the next verse.
Or best among the barracks.
Yeah.
Yeah? 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute.
So this is those who begin, or at the beginning stages, of their spiritual quest. The tendency now is to give every possible reason why people should not have a spiritual quest, or if they have a spiritual quest, to make it, again, for them to enter deeper into materialism. The US law of religion is, I don't know if you know this, if you want to get a 501c3, which is tax exemption according to religion, you just have to say, this is what I believe. And it could be anything. It could be that by, I don't know, I just think of something, that by bringing an assortment of turtles together, that will create a higher purpose in my life. And literally, you could get tax exemption for a religion on the basis of that, or any foolishness, because this is supposed to be sectarian. So any person can come up with any idea, something they believe, and because they have no authority to reference, in one way, that's almost a necessity, because people are so crazy. But it leads to this thing that, okay, this is my spiritual thing, to look at the turtle, all gathered together of 7 species. It's my spiritual perfection. And there'll be people, I bet you if you Google it, there'll be people who do that, and that's their club of 7, specifically the number 7. And they look at that, and when they have that, they're supposed to create an aura, and that's their transcendental perfection. So this is ignorance. This is not the way out. So it's just like if you're falling into, I don't know if you've ever seen quicksand, if you've actually seen it, Or previously, another example similar is, they call it the Chinese handcuffs. They used to have it like the ones with the fingers. I don't see it around anymore. It used to be when I was a kid, in the 5 and dime, they had the, before the dollar stores, they actually had 5 and dime, where there were many things for 5 cents and 10 cents. Not everything. And then they also had, it was a miniature version, and when you put your things in, and you try to pull it out, it holds you more. Or, or your cufflinks. And there are many things. The more that you touch it, the more gooey it becomes. It's like, gotta have someone help you out of that situation. So you fall overboard for a ship, and you're not a good swimmer. So you need someone's help. So this is the beginning of true spiritual emancipation, true spiritual awakening. Brahma atato jignas. Yes, it's not the solution. The materialists, they keep on coming up with more and more solutions. Take a famous city in the United States, which it's an intellectual and medical capital, Boston. So let's take the theory that human beings, which actually those who are intelligent within the scientific and medical fields, and even if they may or may not be theistic, they will acknowledge this, that they don't agree with the myth that medicine is actually improving our health. And the simple proof of this is, if medicine has improved people's health, then we would see that there would be less and less hospitals. Is it not? If medical treatment has made people healthier, not just, putting bandages on things. But if they made healthier, then there would be less and less hospitals. But if you go to Boston, every day there's another hospital. I mean, there are miles on the roads that are simply hospitals, and they're huge hospitals, so many complexes of hospitals. And you see, any place you go, there's not less hospitals and not less medical facilities, but there are more and more. So this is contrary, if you will just take a simple evidence, that there's more and more physical problems with people. Because it's not preventative, it's the attempt at a cure. And actually, I came up with my own theory, and when I meet medical professionals, which is way too often, sadly, I see that they're open. I say, your whole medical science can be boiled down to 3 aspects. You cut, you burn, and you poison. But how do you actually help people because all of these things, cutting a person, that's not nice, right? Burning them is not nice. And poisoning them is not nice. I said, that's not a positive approach to health. And actually, doctors themselves are patients, and once they get to be a patient, and they'll confide in you, which I have little ability to get people to confide in me. Oh my God, the horror stories that they've gone through. You see? So we don't want to belabor that point, because that's a whole 1-week discussion at least, the medical nemesis of this world. But the fact is, there's a book called Socialization of Medicine, and chapter 4 in that book, these doctors who were heads of different, very important and, well-respected doctors, they got together and wrote this book about the socialization. And chapter 4 shows 9 different endemics and pandemics epidemics that affected society. And they showed that this is a myth that when they started to introduce the treatment, those diseases which were sweeping the world were already almost gone. You see? So they bewilder us. This is the whole thing of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is all lies. I don't want to get into the politics of lies, right? Of a person who has told 5,000 to 10,000 lies in the last 2 years. So with lying becomes the cornerstone. Cornerstone of life is just lie, lie, lie. Telling truth, and people become so bewildered they don't know what to do, and they just surrender to that. So the beginning of spiritual life is to have enlightenment where everything is very clear, very, very clear. So that is the fortune of this Krishna consciousness movement. Is that we're not just sitting here and speculating, well, what should I do that will help me advance spiritually? Well, I'll come up with my own formula. It feels very good for me. It's true. We should see a response. It's like, the other day I went someplace and I was talking to someone, and then I said, they did some service for me, so I gave them a book, and then I explained that where I live, it's called Rama Gardens. And I didn't have any flowers to give out, so that was a little sad, but I gave a book instead. And she chanted Rama, and she said, wow. I explained what Rama means. And then she said, I really feel it's so nice. Just once, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So we do see the effect, but it's not based on our own evaluation of the effect. Therefore, when I began talking today, I said, Om Agena Taramandasya Gana Gana Salakaya Chakshurim Militanena Tasmai Sri Garavena. So the essence of this is that we invoke this statement that we are in this situation in this material world in which we can't differentiate matter and spirit. We actually can't. We can be trained to differentiate, just like my father, I had seen him 7 days before, on the 2nd of July, 1959. And then he died on the 9th, and then I was immediately taken home. And there he was, lifeless. So, and then we, in the tradition of our family, we buried his body. So, if my family had gotten around and when my father was alive and we put him in a coffin And he'd be banging and banging and banging and shouting, what are you doing? And we buried him. I mean, whoa, who would do that? What kind of insane person or crazy person, horrible person would take someone not even dear to them and put them in a box and put them in the ground, you see? Would you do that to anybody? You wouldn't even do that to an animal. No, that would, people would consider you horribly cruel. Sometimes, a dog would be there and, people are attached to their dog, and so sometimes they even put it in a coffin or they're buried in the ground, or a turtle or a bird. And if you see someone taking a turtle or a bird and burying it in the ground like a kid, you're like, what are you doing? This is horrible, right? But when they were burying it, everybody was happy, in the sense of, he's being laid to rest. They had a satisfaction. So what is that difference? What is that singular difference? It is that spiritual spark. It is that soul. So we see it all the time. We see the symptom of spiritual life all the time. We are confronted with it 24 hours a day. Yet, this is what it says, we're covered by this ignorance of this material nature. And the prayer is that, please guide me, please help me, please lift me up out of this ignorance of material nature. So the symptom of liberation is that one is exploring this possibility, and by good fortune, and it can come about in hundreds and thousands of ways, directly and indirectly, one is nudged, one is pulled, one is lifted towards the correct and potent spiritual path. So we have so many literatures here which are very accurate. There's to a point those who are in this path who properly utilize the signposts. One should know the signposts. Huh? That's why I gave this example last time. About a month ago I was on some journey, and all of a sudden my phone, my clever phone, I didn't ask it, I called it Gokul Dasi. I called my phone Gokul Devi Dasi. And sometimes it will say Devi is a city 735 miles from here. But sometimes if I don't say Devi, the thing won't reply. So sometimes I have to call it Gokul, or sometimes Dasi. It's very interesting. But I didn't say anything. And I was just going on the journey, and then all of a sudden it says, turn right. Oh, turn right to where? I said, where am I going to go? Just turn right. So this is GPS gone mad, And most of us have this GPS gone mad in our brains. From this first premise, the 15th verse, this demoniac, atheistic principle that there is nothing other than this: eat, drink, and be merry. Enjoy to the fullest satisfaction, because at the time of death there is nothing. So now we have a new GPS, a perfect GPS, that's been actually there before us every second of this life and all our previous lives. The Lord is in our heart, and He's arranging everything around us, but we're blind to that. And the spiritual process, the spiritual association, the spiritual literature makes everything illuminated, crystal clear. We can become crystal clear so that beyond a doubt, beyond any moment of obscurity, we will know exactly what we should be doing to be having the perfect solution of this suffering in this material world, and come to not just ending the suffering. Yogi Prabhu rightly said, most of the persons in this material, all they want is a moment of peace. I go out and talk to people, and then I explain various things, and I give them some of this flower prasadam, and I get them to chant Ram. And they say, "Wow, it's so good. Just a moment of peace." I carry this big box, and just it inundates the whole place, because I can't smell the fragrance because I'm around it all the time. But everybody, whoa, and just smelling the spiritual fragrance, people, they're peaceful, and they're They're just looking for a little moment when they're not in anxiety and suffering and tension. That's happiness for most people. But that's not even a drop of happiness. Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamrita. Spiritual life means that you know how to tap in so that 24 hours, by the grace of the Lord, you will feel very, very happy. Material might be suffering. That we can't end. We can't end what this material nature is. Like, if you're in the prison, then you're suffering according to the laws of the prison. And it's very barbaric. You'd be surprised, or you might not be surprised, how many people are part of the prison system. I mean, there are cities in which at least 12% of the people are part of the prison systems. There are cities here in the United States. There are even states that are almost that bad, like Florida. Or if you take Dallas, my God. Every year, 1 out of every 4 people, 4 houses, have some sort of crime committed to that house. So if you're in a building with 4 apartments, then every year somebody in one of those apartments on the average has a crime committed to them. So there's the prison full of people, mostly, who deserve to be in that prison. We don't get into the politics of misincarceration. But most of the people deserve to be there. So you're there in prison and you're suffering, right? It's not a happy condition. But you're outside and you look and, okay, you might feel sorry for those who are misincarcerated and try to do something about that. But you're not affected by what's going on in the prison. You understand? Is it not? Like sometimes we have a tornado. So you go in a good strong shelter and the tornado can do whatever it needs to do. And you're in the strong shelter of the tornado. You come out, sorry, everything's gone. But you're not gone. So that is the position of a person on the spiritual platform. Yes, things are suffering in this material world. It might affect us externally. But internally, a devotee is never affected. A person who's fixed in the spiritual process is always in that transcendental state of internal happiness. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Do we have any brief questions?
I have one.
Yes, please.
How does one, when he endures physical, mental, or emotional suffering, see that as the grace of the Supreme?
Well, there's the book answer, and then there's what I would say is...
So sorry.
Yes, please out it. The practical answer, which overlaps. My practical answer would be, it's very hard to see the exact position. It becomes a speculation, just like, I don't want to go into details of it. I've had my wonderful opportunity of a good share of material situations that are not comfortable. I'm trying to put it in a delicate way. That most people, I would not wish it on them. Oh no, it's not very nice. So one way that a person can look at it, like Kuliksheka Maharaj, he was accused of something really horrible, that he had raped a woman, a very famous saint, and some politics was there, and some man accused Kuliksheka Maharaj, brought it to the court, that he had raped his wife, and that wasn't true. He was a man of the honest. But the court was there, and so the judge, respectfully asked Kuliksheka Maharaj, how do you plead? And he said, Your Honor, I have to plead that there is no sin, that in my lives, my many millions of lives, I have committed millions upon millions of sins. So there's no sin in the world that is possible that I have not committed. So one perspective, a devotee, a person in spiritual life, will see, there must be something that from the past is catching up with me now. That is one of the more common interpretations of karma. This is actually vikarma, or bad past activities. Of course, most people don't complain and think about it that what we call the good karmas, that we're enjoying the different things in the material world, especially sense gratification or beauty or fame or wealth. So we get wealth, and this is the fact. Hopefully, the wealth is gotten through good means, honest means. But whatever it is, we don't complain about that, but we'll complain, oh, you see, I'm suffering. That is more the bookish answer. But the practical answer is that you see that, this is like a wake-up call. The real thing is like a wake-up call. If there is not sufficient suffering in this, take the theory, God, take kind of a response. For those who accept that God exists and has created this material world, and God is quite brilliant, quite capable of almost anything, then why did He create a material world, including these bodies? They say that there is birth, death, disease, and old age. God, the principle is that God has created a place in which none of these four major categories of suffering exist. It's called Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha without any suffering. And there is no birth, there's no death, there's no old age, and there's no disease. He can create machines that never break down and need no maintenance. There are trees in the spiritual world called Kalpavriksha trees. And they give any kind of fruit, not just one. Someone sent me a link that there was one tree with 40 different fruits. But in the spiritual world, there are trees with billions of types of fruits. Here we have what you see in the market, some 10 fruits, and maybe you can think of 40 fruits. There used to be, if you go around the world, there are hundreds and thousands of fruits. But in the spiritual world, there are all the trees. They can produce whatever you like beyond your imagination. You may never have imagined the fruit, and each fruit is so delicious that just touching the fruit you feel satisfied. Because you're already satisfied. So the condition is that a devotee looks at the material world and understands that we need these wake-up calls. The best answer to your question is given by Queen Kunti. After the battle of Kurukshetra, our supreme friend, our supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, Sri Govinda, whose auntie was Queen Kunti, and they were very close. She took care of him exactly as a son. It's not much described in the literatures that we have, but she took care of him very much as a son. Because the Pandavas and Krishna and Delhi, Hastinapur, and Indraprastha and Vrindavan, they were connected. Actually, it's not much described, but they had a lot of intercourse going back and forth. And Krishna, they would go to Delhi, but it's not described. But she took care of him as a son. And then at the end of the she had suffered like anything, like seeing her son, especially a mother. The torture for a parent, but especially the mother, the father also, when something happens to their child, it's 100 times more painful than if something happens to them. My daughter has troubles, and whenever I hear of it, it's so, I tell her, I said, I listen to her, and but I can't say much, because if I tell her what actions I want to take, she may not like it, so. But it's so intolerable. So Queen Kunti had to tolerate the difficulties of her children. She didn't think much of her own difficulties. So Krishna is like her son in the end, and he's saying, Mother, you have suffered anything. So please, now that everything's over, what do you want? So, does anybody remember? No or no? What did Queen Kunti ask? Now she's the very dear, mother of Krishna, of God. She can get anything. What did she ask?
She said, let the calamities befall me, because only by that occurring will I remember you, and by remembering you, the repeated cycle of birth and death will end.
Yes, perfect. She could understand perfectly, and it's the perfect, wonderful, spotless example for us. Yes, it's very uncomfortable. It's very hellish. But even we have to take it at face value that when these devotees suffer, they have some experience. But because they have so much bliss inside of them and their identity is so pure, it's many times less than we might experience even at our best. But definitely we have to take it at face value, that they experience these sufferings. It's not a joke, that they experience these sufferings. But it's very minimal. It's like, this horrible tornado is there, but we're safe inside. Everything we have materially may be gone, but what does it matter? In the end, it's, you go out, to a certain part of your house and you do something early in the morning and then you push a certain lever, right? Isn't it? In the morning we do something, from what we ate the day before, and we go to a certain throne and sit there, and then we push a certain lever. We want to push that lever, right? We don't want to keep it in boxes and say, oh, this is mine, this is mine. You come in the house and the person has all these jars of their, special produce, Look at what I have, 50,000 bottles. It's my whole life's production. Whoa, what a crazy person. So the devotee is very unattached to these things. So thank you, Mataji. That was the perfect answer. All right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Prabhu. Thank you for doing that.